your hometown news and information station.
Welcome back. I'm Vincent Perryman, and you're watching Legalese. Joining us on our show is attorney Michael Scholl of the Scholl Law Firm. We were discussing tax crimes. Mike, we gave a general overview, kind of what a tax crime is and kind of what the IRS looks at. But once the IRS has decided to pursue a criminal investigation on a taxpayer, what are the processes that the IRS goes through, and how does it wind up in a federal court?
Usually what will happen is, first of all, they've obviously been talking to the person at this point civilly. Okay, they've been trying to rectify whatever situation it may be, whether it's to file your tax return, amend your tax returns, or pay your taxes, whatever the situation may be. At that point, the first thing you're going to find out is, like I said in the previous segment, is that you're going to be contacted by an agent. And they usually always show up in pairs. And once you get contacted by a criminal investigative agent, you can be rest assured that they are looking at trying to indict you. The next thing that they will do is they will attempt to speak with you about your taxes. Anytime that you have a criminal IRS agent contact you about speaking with you, you should contact an attorney immediately, because anything that they use or try to talk to you about definitely will be used against you again in court. And keep in mind, if you have an issue where you're concerned that you may have some criminal liability on something, anytime you're talking to the IRS or anytime you're talking about your tax situation, everything will definitely come back again one day if they take and indict you in this case. Once the criminal investigation gets involved, the IRS Criminal Investigation Unit will make a recommendation to the U.S. Attorney's Office, whoever the local U.S. Attorney's Office is. Here in Memphis, that'd be the Western District. And so it would be the U.S. Attorney's Office that's located downtown here. Once they make a recommendation, they will essentially what we call run it up the flagpole. They will send it to the Department of Justice in Washington, D.C. to get approval as to where they want to proceed as far as a indictment is concerned. At that point, once approval has been made, once they figure out what crime that they are going to try to prosecute you for or have you indicted for, the local U.S. attorney will go to the grand jury and submit all the information which these investigative agents have gathered, which means if you've talked to them, they're going to submit whatever statements you made to the grand jury to decide if they believe you may or may not have committed a tax crime. At that point, if they indict you, then what will happen is they will contact you. You will have to turn yourself into the U.S. Marshal's office. Depending on your tax issue and depending on what position you take, how much money you owe, will make a determination of whether or not you would get a bond and they would let you out of jail. Okay, so once they find this indictment, they're going to come and arrest you, or they're going to, if you've had an attorney working with you. That's why I say, if these investigative agents come out to see you, get an attorney. Most of the time, the attorney can talk with the U.S. Marshal's office and the U.S. Attorney's office, make arrangements for you to turn yourself in, and you would basically go down in the morning to the U.S. Marshal's office. In the afternoon, you'd be in court and arrange to be let out on bond at that point. And like I said, depending on what your record is, depending on where you live, the extent of the evasion or whatever tax crime you had depends on whether they'll let you out of jail. So.
Yeah, and it's kind of an interesting process with all of that, because to me, what I always tell people when they say, oh, well, somebody came and I did an interview with them with the IRS on the civil side of it, I always ask, I'm like, okay, anybody ever talked to out of these IRS agents, did they carry a gun?
Right.
If they did, they've been through FLETC down there in Georgia, and they are a law enforcement officer. And
they're going to tell you, a lot of times they're going to say, they're going to hand you a card and say, I'm a criminal investigator. And like I said, normally they show up in pairs of two. So.
And I did have one instance where I'm defending an audit, and I get into the conversation with the agent, and they start talking about their firearm qualifications. And I'm sitting there going, you what? And apparently the Jackson, Tennessee office will take the law enforcement to the range and let them qualify, which I have no idea.
Yeah, I have no idea why they do that.
Why they do that, and as a former federal law enforcement officer, I sit there and I scratch my head at that. But, you know, occasionally something like that comes up, and I got very concerned that we were in an eggshell audit at that time.
Right.
Which you may be able to give some, shine some light on what an eggshell audit is and things of that nature.
Well, they sort of get you in under the guise that you're doing an audit, and they're really trying to gather information in order to criminally prosecute you, or try to get information to see what they may have on you as far as any kind of crime is concerned. You probably handle a lot more of those than I deal with.
Yeah, and it's one of those that there are certain things that if they begin to ask that sort of step into the criminal realm that you get concerned about, and I think that that's one of the reasons why it's important even in a regular audit or exam to have an attorney that's experienced present, so that way it's not something a layperson would pick up on.
Well, and I tell any of my clients and any clients that I deal with regards to a civil and even the civil side, I tell them if you're actually at the point where you're going to meet with the IRS, and I'm not talking about calling them on the telephone, can I set up a payment arrangement or whatever that is. When you're actually at the point where they want to set up a meeting with you, even on the civil side, you should always have an attorney, whether it's civil or criminal, depending on which way it's going, your attorney, and if you have an accountant that's involved. And keep in mind, whatever you tell your accountant is not privileged information. So when you're talking to your accountant, they can subpoena your accountant in and ask about the conversations that you had with your accountant. The only person that you have any private conversations with is your attorney.
Right, and it is interesting, even on the civil side, when you go down to the Falls building for one of these interviews, the room that you're put in is worse than any interrogation room I saw as an officer or anything like that. It's tight quarters. They come through a door in the back, and it really makes me think of criminal practice from that standpoint.
Well, the biggest thing the IRS has with people is intimidation. You know, as much as you hate to say that, people fear the IRS, and the biggest thing they have going for them is scaring people. And so the best way to get yourself protected is by not being by yourself, because there's all sorts of things they can say to you. There's no parameters as to what they can say to you to get you to do things.
Okay, and when we return from our break, we'll talk more with Michael Scholl about tax crimes. Please stay with us.